Outstanding. Thank you for joining us. And with that, I'm delighted to turn it over to Todd Baker with Bakers Candies in Greenwood, Nebraska. My wife and I drive by their establishment every day, and it's really tough not to swing into that parking lot on a daily basis to load up. If you have never been there, it's a must-see. You have to go to their outlet. It's new in Greenwood. They expanded their space dramatically, and if you have any kind of a sweet tooth, you'll go crazy. If you have grandkids, take the grandkids. I mean, they not only have their own candy that they make and sell, but they stock candy from all over the country. There'll be stuff there from your childhood that you remember. They sell soda pops with original sweeteners, cane sugar rather than corn syrup. They have everything in there that would stimulate a sweet tooth. So you got to check it out. And before I turn it over to Todd, I have to put a plug in for the dark green wrappers, which is dark chocolate mint. So Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being here today.
Sure. Well, it's certainly my pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. Anytime we get a chance to get outside of the chocolate factory, in this case, I'm still here, but just to tell our story, it's really a privilege because we find that the more we tell our story, the more we're able to connect with our customers, and that's really how we've built this family brand. Bakers Candies is a family business in the truest sense of the word. It was actually my father, Kevin Baker, who started the business. The whole family was involved. So even as a young tyke, I think I was in the first grade when we started dreaming about starting a chocolate factory. But the entrepreneurial spirit was really was born and ingrained into our family from the very beginning. In the same way that you hear stories largely from maybe a generation earlier where family businesses were started and children were brought up working in the business. Even though this would have been the early 1980s, our family business really followed that same set of tracks. My brother and I worked in the chocolate factory for as long as we can really remember, and unique to my childhood, I was the only kid in Waverly School District, which would be District 145, where the school bus literally dropped us off here at the chocolate plant so that we could work with mom and dad. That's where mom and dad were. And so it was as good as dropping us off at home every day. And so this is really the only thing I know. And so I give the disclosure, if we get off subject, I'm oftentimes revealed for knowing little of anything. But on the subject of chocolate, small business, and entrepreneurship, this is really all I've ever known. So quickly, I'll just get into the history of our story. For those that don't know it, my dad was actually a defense contractor during the Vietnam era. Dad mass-produced missile systems, and he has an extraordinary gift for mass-producing things. He has one of those beautiful minds. He can take a look at a complex piece of machinery, and he can break it down to its most simple components, and then he can visualize the type of machinery that would be required to then mass produce the object that he's looking at. And so that's a skill set that's unique. There's very few people on planet Earth who possess that skill set. And so it was come to little surprise to many of you, the U.S. Defense Department recognizes the value of a gift like that. And so they found Dad. Dad actually was a student at SCC Milford. He was in the electromechanical program at Milford, and his professors there at Milford recognized his unique gift and got him in touch with the right people. And so that's really the genesis of his story. Dad was really good at mass producing things. And so the story always is told that he was a missile designer. Dad never designed a missile. But what he would do is they would give him a blueprint for 30,000 missiles by Thanksgiving, a blueprint and an order, and his job was to figure out how to get that done. And so He got really good at mass producing things, so good, in fact, that he kind of worked himself out of a job. They made so many missiles out of the Brunswick, then General Dynamics plant down in Lincoln, Nebraska, that the U.S. military is still here 30 years later, 40 years later, still using many of the missiles that were produced in Lincoln, Nebraska in the early to mid 1970s. And so Dad found himself out of work for the first time in his life with a skill set where he was really good at mass producing things, not a lot of opportunity for mass production technology guys, because in the late 1970s, the US economy, especially pertaining to manufacturing, was in a recession. Very few people who made things were looking to build more of them. And so Dad actually found work mass producing or building mass production chocolate equipment, because as it is, chocolate tends to work inversely to the rest of the greater market. It turns out when people get depressed, they eat more chocolate. And so chocolate is a favorite tool of hedge funds. They love to hold cocoa because they know that it increases in its demand as the economy sours. And so Dad was mass producing chocolate equipment, and what he found was an entire industry that was almost completely untouched by the Industrial Revolution. Gourmet chocolate was a wonderland for a guy with his skill set, because everything in gourmet chocolate in the late 1970s was being handmade. It was handmade, hand decorated, hand placed into boxes. It was extremely labor intensive, and Dad knew that he could build mass production equipment that could do much of what was being done by hand. In the late 1970s, about 80% of a manufacturer's cost was actually directly related to labor in production. So you were getting the other 20% was the ingredients, the packaging, the marketing, everything else. 80% was labor in production. And so Dad knew that he could take labor in production to almost a zero, spend all the extra money on ingredients, and he birthed a very simple idea that he got so excited about that rather than sell his mass production equipment, he started a chocolate factory. Greenwood, Nebraska is about the worst place you could ever dream of to start a chocolate factory. This is not an ideal location for building a chocolate factory. And the reason is because cocoa only grows within about 10 degrees of the equator. And that means that we don't grow any cocoa domestically in the United States of America. It's a commodity that trades on the open market the same way that corn and soybeans do here in the Midwest. And all cocoa is brought into the United States on boats into port. And so the vast majority of the United States chocolate industry is actually built within 1 hour of a major port. That would be in the Northeast, and then of course along California. That's where you'll find most chocolate factories, because that's where the cocoa is. But this is home for us. The Baker family goes back 5 generations in Cass County, Nebraska, and Dad was determined to build a chocolate factory here where he knew he was home. He also saw that there was opportunity. There were no chocolate manufacturers left in the state of Nebraska, and so Dad decided to just take advantage of the opportunity and go for it. And the result is a really unique business. We were the first candy company in the history of the world, we figured in the mid 1980s, to start with a 100% fully custom automated manufacturing process and no recipe. That really is unique, because the story in candy and chocolate is always the opposite. Everybody starts with a recipe. Somebody has a recipe for candy, the candy's good, and people want to buy it. And so they figure out ways to make more of it. And as it sells more, they make more. And that trend continues. Eventually, it puts enough pressure on the candy maker to find ways to automate. But all of the equipment is always secondary to the recipe. Because the recipe came first, the automated equipment has to correspond to the recipe. And so what happens is, over time, the manufacturing processes themselves are full of all kinds of inefficiencies. And it results in expensive candy. What we did at Bakers Candies is essentially reverse engineer the chocolate process. Dad started with what we still believe to this day to be the absolute most cost-effective way you can possibly produce gourmet chocolate. And then we tailor made all of our recipes to the process. And that really is the unique break for Bakers Candies. We were able to produce a higher quality chocolate at a lower price than the largest candy companies that we would ever compete with. And we occupy a unique space where there's virtually no competition, and that is low cost gourmet chocolate. When you get into gourmet segments, they're typically run by artisans. Artisans tend to dominate gourmet space, and what they're essentially selling you in gourmet space is not only the highest quality ingredients, but also the highest quality presentation that they can possibly present to you. That's true not just in food manufacturing, but also in restaurants, things like that. And the goal in gourmet space is always to be the most expensive. Once you get into gourmet, the goal is, how do we justify getting $30 a pound or $40 a pound or $50 a pound for the products that we make, because therein is where you'll find your margin. My dad took a really unique perspective, though, on gourmet manufacturing. He said he wanted to manufacture gourmet, make the best quality, but he wanted to market it to blue collar people, because he perceived most of us here in the Midwest to be relatively blue collar in our taste. And so we really started marketing gourmet chocolate to regular people, and we wanted to be a low cost provider within gourmet chocolate, and that's exactly what we were able to do. And there's really no competition for this space. To this day, we're an anomaly and a problem for the chocolate industry. We recently grew large enough that now we report our annual sales to the NCA, which is the National Confectionery Association, and they publish data holistically to across the industry. It helps us kind of keep track of trends and what's happening. But Bakers Candies presented a problem even for them, because our product in terms of quality competes with the best in the world. And so we should report in that gourmet category. But our price points make everyone else in that category extremely uncomfortable. And so they don't want us there. But if they drop us down to mass tier reporting, which is the candy companies that we'll compete with in terms of prices, our quality makes our competitors there look very uncomfortable as well. And so they actually invented a category for Bakers Candies, and we are still the only candy company that reports in that category. And we call it blue collar gourmet. We're the candy manufacturer that makes gourmet chocolate for blue collar people. And most of the invention that really led to the success of our business stems from this idea that we want to market gourmet chocolate to regular people. And so some of the most simple things that we did in an effort to achieve that goal ended up being the things that have made us the most successful. The first thing that Dad wanted to do with our chocolate was he wanted to make sure that every piece we produced was individually wrapped and color coded, so that you knew which flavor you were eating when you unwrapped one of our melt-aways. And so you'll know that it used to be that you would buy a box of gourmet chocolates. They all looked fairly identical. They were placed in a sample box of some kind, and you had to bite halfway through one just to figure out what you were eating. Dad hated that, and so does everyone else. And so he wanted to make sure that no one ever had to do that with a Bakers Candies chocolate melt-away, the melt-away being our signature piece. And it was a huge hit right off the bat. The next thing that we did that was super unique was we took gourmet chocolate, we individually wrapped it, and then we put it in a bag. And I know that seems like an almost insulting, simple observation, but when we started, we did the same thing that everybody else did. We put our gourmet chocolate in a fancy box, because that is the way gourmet chocolate had always traditionally been sold. But we noticed a trend very early on, and that is that when you sell chocolate in a fancy box, particularly in the Midwest, where we deal with a certain type of consumer, there is a purchase guilt that is associated with that fancy box of chocolate. And so what that looked like for us is, in our little outlet store, every local person from the Cass County area here who would come in to buy a box of our candy had to come to the checkout counter with an explanation for why they were buying it, lest we judge them for buying themselves something fancy. And so we heard the stories over and over again. This is for my wife. It's our anniversary. What they were really saying is, don't judge me. This is for my daughter. It's her. She's graduating from college. It's a gift, a present. Don't judge me. This is or we would hear the story. Boy, I'm in big trouble, and this is my get out of jail free card tonight. Whatever it might be. Every box of chocolate we sold had to come with an excuse, and we said, how can we get around having to overcome that purchase guilt that's associated with buying yourself something fancy? And so Dad just started putting gourmet chocolate in a bag, and we worked really hard to make the packaging almost invisible, and it puts the visual right on the chocolates themselves. And the result was that our sales quadrupled in 1 year. In the Midwest, all of a sudden, gourmet chocolate for the first time ever was available as a grocery item, something that you could buy without any kind of personal guilt. You bought in quantity, you saved money, and that's the way that Midwest consumers prefer to buy things. And so the most chocolate companies, which are headquartered on the coasts, still to this day don't understand the mentality of a Midwest consumer versus a consumer on the coast who might be happy to buy themselves a fancy box of chocolate and in fact may consider it some kind of a status symbol. So another simple observation that led to a huge break for Bakers Candies. We continue to do things that are very unique because everything we do is catered to a very specific kind of consumer that virtually no one else in our field is marketing to. And so that continues to be a huge part of our story to this day. Some of the other things that make us unique, Bakers Candies, if you were on our production floor, you would see that the entire manufacturing process from the beginning to the end is 100% automated. The candies are never touched by human hand. Machinery does virtually 100% of all the labor intensive work on the production floor. And every single one of our machines on the production floor was actually invented and first built by my father, Kevin Baker. And so we have a full custom machine shop located right here on the plant, and we build all our own parts and maintain all our own equipment to this day. And so we tell people all the time, what we do is really unique because we're actually a bunch of engineers running a chocolate factory. And that's what it takes to run a company like Bakers Candies. And so I'm quick to disclose that oftentimes I think we could be revealed for being poor businessmen because we don't follow the typical guidelines for how to run a business, but we do run this entire plant essentially on a mathematical algorithm, which is exactly the kind of way that an engineer would run a business. And so it works for us. And actually, this method works exceedingly well for a family business. And I'd be happy to talk more about where we put our goals and things like that a little bit later. But I guess the final piece that I would want to disclose that's unique about what we do is that we set out, one of the other core tenets that Dad had when he started the business was he didn't want to take over the world. He just simply wanted to make Nebraska's chocolate. We had a goal, and that was to make Nebraska's chocolate. We felt like it was an attainable goal for a family business. And we also felt like it was a goal that has a great precedent for successful food entrepreneurs in the state of Nebraska. And when I say that, this is what I mean. In the state of Nebraska, all you have to do to start, run, and maintain a successful family business, particularly in the world of food, is make Nebraska's anything. And when I say this, I'll give you the preface, and I won't have to give you the brands because you'll know them. If I told you that I wanted to be successful, or there was a company that once said, I want to be successful making Nebraska's orange salad dressing. Everybody knows what that brand is. Mac Hall, who runs Dorothy Lynch, has been exceedingly successful making Nebraska's orange salad dressing. Likewise, if I said, I want to make Nebraska's oven stuffed sandwiches, everyone knows who makes Nebraska's oven stuffed sandwiches. The Runza franchise has been a dominant force in fast food across the state of Nebraska. It's a brand that frankly may not work anywhere else. If I wanted to make Nebraska's red hot dogs or Nebraska's stadium pizza or whatever it may be, there's a great precedent for making Nebraska's Anything a successful family brand. And so Dad knew that all you had to do to make a successful chocolate brand in the state of Nebraska was to make Nebraska's chocolate. And fortunately for us, it was a brand that no one had really ever stuck claim to. And so that's really what we set out to do. And last year in the state of Nebraska, we estimate that we sold about 30 million chocolate melt-aways here in the state of Nebraska. So in a state with 1.5 million people, to use a nice round number, that averages out to about 20 chocolate melt-aways per every Nebraskan. And that speaks to us that we're doing a successful job of staking our claim to Nebraska's chocolate. We made about 40 million chocolate melt-aways total. So for the 30 million we sold here in the state, we sold another 10 million outside of the state of Nebraska. But that means that 75% of our business comes from right within the state. And I can assure you, a family can live very comfortably making Nebraska's Anything. And so that was really the brand we wanted to build, and that's the brand that we have built. And we live really comfortably having achieved that goal. Now we're a family business in the truest sense. My brother and I are second generation business owners, and we continue to grow the family business in incremental growth. We say no to new opportunities far more than we say yes, simply because managed growth is an important part of managing a family business. But there is a third generation of little bakers that are coming up in the business now. Between my brother and I, we're at 9 currently, with a 10th on the way. And so we've got a whole slew of little bakers coming up in the business the same way that my brother and I were raised in the business. And should they decide to take the business further beyond the borders of this state, they'll have that opportunity. But the great thing about building a company this way is that you have an almost unshakable foundation here within the state of Nebraska, because Nebraskans are so incredibly loyal to the good things that are made here. Nebraskans are proud of things that are made here. They can't wait to share them with people who come to visit, or relatives, friends who live out of state. And if you can do a good job of capitalizing on that market, make Nebraskans proud of the fact that you're there, you can convert a customer into a fan and then into your greatest marketer. And so we really, to this day, spend virtually nothing on marketing. Our marketing is done by the people who consume our candy, who happen to also be our greatest fans. And so we didn't realize the entire power of that until just recently, when we started on social media for the very first time. We started a Facebook page maybe 2 years ago, way late to the game. But we quickly realized that anything we post online is shared hundreds of times, and we have thousands and thousands of followers that go crazy over the simplest things that we put out there, because our customers really are fans of the product, and that's one of the things I think that makes us most proud. And so we look to the future knowing that our growth will come from exactly there. So I think that's the best I can do at summarizing the history of our business, kind of how we do what we do, and where we're looking to grow in the future. That's my 20-minute core spiel. And at this point, I'd love to know what kinds of things you'd like to know about us and what we do. I could probably be more on point if I answer questions, I think. So.
All right. I know the questions are out there. Todd, thank you. That was fascinating. I'm going to start off with a question for you. Since you guys built your own equipment, and it's very unique, obviously works very well, have you ever been approached to sell chocolate making equipment?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad he's a funny guy, because he could have been successful doing just about anything I think he'd ever wanted to do. His first passion of all things is still to this day experimental aviation. Dad considers experimental aviation to be kind of the pinnacle of engineering achievement, building aerobatic stunt planes that no one has ever built before, capable of doing things that were once thought impossible, that kind of thing. But all of the inventions Dad builds, he never sells. He builds them kind of just to prove they can be done, and then he moves on. And in the same way with our chocolate equipment, What we have here is exceedingly unique, and it kind of gives us our competitive advantage. Without a doubt, we could sell the manufacturing process to other manufacturers. We could produce mass production equipment here and sell, and there could be an entire separate company that would be successful doing that. But again, that takes the joy away from invention. And I think for Dad, he's very much still tickled coming in and watching his machines work and mass produce chocolate, knowing that no one else is doing it this way. So.
Okay, other questions for Todd?
Todd, I have one. Can you share with us your philosophy? Because I know you've been an acquisition target your whole company. And I think I have a better sense of that having heard your story now about the family part of it. But can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's funny. There are so many large companies, well-respected companies, that seldom ever have a unique idea. Most of their greatest achievements have come through their access to cash and their ability to acquire good ideas from the people who have them. And so we frustrate. When I say we, I mean not Bakers Candies, the company, as well as the Baker family. We frustrate the daylights out of really powerfully business-minded people, because I think they see that we sit on a wealth of potential for growth, and yet we say no. We say no more than we say yes. In fact, far more than we say yes to new opportunities. Even our strongest retailers, we cap at how much volume we sell to them, because one of the core values of our company is that we want to work for ourselves. We don't ever want to be working for specifically for a large company like, say, a Walmart or a Walgreens, somebody like that. And so we say no to opportunities to grow nationally. And that just frustrates the daylights out of people who have aspirations of world conquest. And big chocolate companies would love to acquire a company like ours, as well as just powerful business-minded people. And yet we're a debt-free company with little incentive to chase after dreams that we know will cost us the core value of this business, which is family. And so we're able to fend off acquisition simply because we have no incentive to want to sell. Should we ever decide we would want to, it would be easy to do. But the reality is, what we love about this isn't making money. And actually, what we love about this, if I'm being totally honest, isn't making candy. What we love about what we do is the fact that it is a family business, and that we get to do this together. And that's the best part. That's the payoff for us, is the family part. One of the things that my mom always told us when we were growing up is that the business exists to serve our family. We don't exist to serve the business. And that was important perspective. I think Mom also said, she's probably not as proud of me saying this publicly, but I think she once told my brother and I, if this business ever comes between my family, I'll burn it to the ground, was her quote exactly. And the message was well received. We understood exactly what she meant, because frankly, what's the point of a business if it comes at the cost, at that kind of a cost to a family? Certainly we're not willing to sell our souls. And so maintaining perspective is probably extremely important, more than about money, more than about anything else. It's about maintaining perspective and values that allows us to navigate that acquisition and business minefield that every small business that is growing rapidly has to walk. So it's really about maintaining perspective.
Thank you.
Todd, as a customer, thank you for that, philosophy, for that business practice, for the fact that, as we all see, companies like yours are bought by the big conglomerates, and then they change. Because they're using cheaper ingredients, they're using whatever, and they lose their customer base that you have built. And just thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, we're so thankful to we're thankful to our customers, and we know that we've made our customers a promise, and probably the stress that we experience running this business, it's not typically related to sales. We have no debt, so it's not related to debt. Most of the stress we experience is in knowing that we've made a promise to our customers, and we want to make sure that we always make good on that. And so that objective is always first and foremost in our minds when we make decisions out here. So just thank you.
I think the FDA had was talking about banning hydrogenated vegetable oil, which I think is one of the ingredients. And I don't know whether that's like been forcing some sort of reformulation to how you're manufacturing stuff. I would imagine, if a key ingredient gets like you have to change it, then that could be kind of disruptive.
For sure. Yeah, the operating a food manufacturing in the United States means working directly with the FDA. And that is one of the difficult things, I think, especially for young food entrepreneurs who are cutting their teeth in this kind of industry. I think they're overwhelmed oftentimes by the amount of government regulation in food manufacturing. The hydrogenated vegetable oil, it's particularly partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, is what they're really after, because the result of that hydrogenation process is typically the inclusion of trans fat, which was, of course, everybody became aware of here about 5-6 years ago. And food manufacturers, most conscientious food manufacturers moved quickly to eliminate the trans fat and are now working either with fully or holistically hydrogenated oils, or they've moved away from them completely. But the free market works exceedingly well to eliminate ingredients that turn off consumers. When people quit buying things because they contain an ingredient, both food manufacturers and the commodity suppliers who support food manufacturers move pretty quickly to find alternatives for the recipe. And so, yeah, we've watched the formula has changed. We've been doing this 35 years now, and our formula has changed in part because we've learned about different ingredients, potentially negative effects, things like that. But the one thing that we're proud to say is that even though the recipe has had to change as we've evolved and learned more, we feel like it only gets better because, again, where the money flows, typically the free market reacts, and it's incredible what technology has made available to food manufacturers today. There's a reason we use those old oils, and it was because they were the best that was available 10, 15, 20 years ago. And the stuff that's available now is far better than what we could have dreamed of when we started the business. So it's kind of fun to follow new trends in ingredients too. But the FDA is a big deal. There's a reason that the majority of the United States confectionery industry exists outside of the United States. The majority of US candy is actually made in Mexico without FDA oversight. And there's a good reason for that. It's far cheaper to make down there. Plus they can acquire sugar, which is a primary ingredient in all candy, without having to pay the US sugar tariff. And then under NAFTA, or the old NAFTA, now the new trade agreement, you're able to import finished candy products into the United States without having to ever pay the sugar tariff that a US manufacturer has to pay on the front end for our ingredient. And so that's a major loophole that's pushed the majority of the US confectionery industry either into Mexico or even overseas.
Any other questions for Todd?
Are you trying to use as many local Nebraska ingredients as possible? And I don't know whether beet sugar can even compete with the cane sugar or whatever for your sweeteners, but there's a number of industries here in Nebraska. Are you able to use any of their ingredients?
Yeah, we are. In fact, we work with probably less so on the ingredient side because I'll be honest, probably 90% of the volume of one of our pieces of chocolate is really two ingredients. It's cocoa mass and cocoa butter. And both of them grow in that really narrow window, kind of around the center there, that 10 degrees of the equator. So you picture it, it's mostly ocean. And the widest stretch of growing region exists across Africa, which is Sahara Desert. And so we have kind of coastal Africa, a small segment of South America, and a few islands in the South Pacific. And that's pretty much where we can go to source cocoa. But we use local companies for virtually everything else. That is our heart. We are happy to sacrifice dollars so that we can support local business. And so everything from packaging to the corrugated cardboard we use to companies that we work with for marketing or advertising or that kind of thing. Virtually anything that we work with is sourced locally whenever possible. And being a part of a local economy is part of the fun of doing what we do. Some of our best customers are also companies that we in turn do business with, and we love those reciprocal relationships. I say we say no to new business far more than we say yes, but if I'm being honest, the companies that we say yes to doing business with most often are oftentimes companies that we're personally doing business with in some other regard. And so we love symbiotic relationships where both parties are winning. Those are fun to be a part of. And we oftentimes say that we're really not, we don't like to network. We're not networkers, but we do see the value in building friendships. And so we kind of cut the whole empty business model out and just say, you know what, we just like having friends in business. It pays to have friends who do things. And so having friends who can help with marketing, friends who can help with attorney services, friends who help with banking, friends who help with packaging. That's really how we've built the business. And that's what makes us happy to come to work every day, is knowing when we need those things, we can reach out to a friend. So.
Got time for one more question if anybody has one.
Todd, I was going to ask about your custom business, like custom orders for weddings and special events and that sort of thing. Can you talk to us about that? Is that a big part, little part, annoying part?
Sure. No, it's a great question. Actually, that ties into the local source question. So unfortunately, we're not doing a lot of what we traditionally called our private label business. We did a lot of small custom wrappers, weddings, things like that. We built a company with a lot of that kind of business. But most all of our printing was done locally by a printer called Jacob North, who used to be out of Lincoln. Through a unfortunate series of acquisitions, they were eventually closed down, and we've struggled to find a local printer to work with, and so we haven't really done a lot of that kind of small direct private label manufacturing. But we do some large scale private label manufacturing. One of the things about being a mid-sized manufacturer is that we're large enough to take on private label manufacturing projects for other candy companies. We're actually making other candy companies candies right here in our plant and putting their brand name on it. And we're large enough to do that for them, and yet we're small enough that we'll take the business. Whereas, 95% of this industry is controlled by really 3 major brands, and they're so large that they would never mess around with smaller private label contracts, things like that. And so we're in a sweet spot for that kind of business, and that's really the business we probably say no to more than anything is. Unless it's just really right in our wheelhouse, we tend to find that the juice isn't worth the squeeze oftentimes on projects like that. They end up being a lot of work, and it's profit that we don't need and aren't really greedy for. So.
Todd, that was absolutely fascinating. Big fan. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. That was just terrific, and your enthusiasm for the business is obvious. So I wish you continued luck, you and your entire family. Everybody go out there, and if you have not been to their store in Greenwood, take an afternoon sometimes and go check it out. Bring your checkbook. You will need it, and it is great chocolate. And again, I'll put a plug in for the dark greens. With that, thank you everybody for being here. Please join us next week for Chad Klein with Doorstep Diner Catering. Chad's a character and has been making a name for himself by eating weird things on the internet. So join us next week, and you may get to see him consume something that most of us wouldn't touch. So anyway, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week.